Let's go back in time to 1945. During a warm August evening in Tokyo, people are running back to their homes through the dark and gloomy streets, stepping through all the rubble left from firebomb raids. The Japanese cabinets are meeting, considering the mounting evidence of Japan's loss. Nevertheless, the diehards, led by War Minister Kurachika Anami, wish to fight to the death. Air raid sirens suddenly scream. Two super fortresses rotate in the sky just beyond the city as a single, massive missile drops through the darkness towards the water. It explodes a mile above the waterline, marking the moment that completely changes the past, present, and future of warfare. The morality of dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki continues to spark passionate debates to this day. Some defend them as a necessary attack against an unforgiving opponent, while others condemn them as cruelty. Even US President Harry S. Truman's chief of staff called the atomic bomb a barbarous weapon, saying that, in being the first to use it, we have adopted an ethical standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Ages. But just imagine for a moment that the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happened. What if we lived in an alternate reality, where the Allies failed to create nuclear weapons, or President Truman couldn't bring himself to use the most horrible bomb in the history of the world, as he put it? What would have happened if this timeline had been followed? It was springtime. The Japanese had finally beaten Burma, but they weren't ready to throw in the towel just yet. They were ready to fight to the bitter end, no matter what stood in their way. Even though Japan's defeat was certain, the country's military chiefs refused to acknowledge it. The generals of Japan wanted the war to end on their terms, which, given their situation, seemed pretty crazy. Japan wanted to make sure that for whatever the Americans gained, there would be great bloodshed. At this point, the United States knew that their adversaries would fight tooth and nail to defend their territory, and if they set foot on the Japanese mainland, American armed forces would lose hundreds of thousands of servicemen. Planning to make their final stand, Japan launched a series of deadly air raids on the US Navy. But that wasn't enough, and Major General Curtis LeMay issued the order to attack Tokyo shortly after. Almost 325 bombers flew low over the city, dropping so many bombs in such a short period that the city looked like a fiery inferno. This was considered an unlikely success for America, since Tokyo, being the Japanese capital and largest city, was difficult to penetrate. According to one American writing home, fires were everywhere, and the destruction could have been nothing less than catastrophic. The Tokyo bombing killed 100,000 people and caused 1 million people to lose their homes, with another 1 million suffering severe injuries. In cities such as Osaka and Kobe, American B-29 bombers struck, bringing devastation and death. Japanese Zeros failed to defend the skies. It was a complete massacre. After this loss, Japan got desperate. They used young pilots to fly their jets straight into American ships and planes. They were known as kamikaze pilots, which means divine wind in Japanese. The pilots believed they were acting as God's agents, giving their lives to defend their homeland against the less than divine Americans. While many pilots volunteered, many others were scared to commit what was essentially glorified suicide. Could you blame them? By May 1945, Hitler was dead, Germany was defeated, and the Soviets were wreaking havoc on the remaining civilian populations throughout Eastern Europe. The Japanese, on the other hand, were not about to give up. Despite how terrible this style of combat was, Their success rates increased after they started developing more kamikaze pilots. Kamikazes killed over 7,000 Allied personnel, injuring over 50,000 others. As for the Japanese pilots, an estimated 3,000 took their own lives by crashing their planes. With these results, the generals believed they could force the US to come to reasonable terms. But little did they know what was in store for them. British scientists, who had been ahead in the atomic bomb-making area, had already joined the Manhattan Project in the United States. The Allies were not ready to send more soldiers to their deaths. The atomic bomb was ready to go, but dropping it was an ethical nightmare. The Japanese had no idea what was going to happen next. In terms of morality, many people are now asking why the Americans didn't at least issue an open threat. Would those Japanese generals have surrendered? Well, it's pretty complex. While any rational person would fear a bomb with the power to vaporize you, to the Allies, there were far too many Japanese troops and citizens serving in their divine war. Some Japanese troops wrote that they could never fathom such a thing happening, as those bombs were unimaginable. Between 129,000 and 226,000 people were killed in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with up to 240,000 people dying later from the bomb's effects, of which the civilians made up the great majority of those killed. As bad as it was, when the US assessed the devastation that a land invasion would do, it was anticipated that between 400,000 and 800,000 Allied soldiers, both American and British, would likely be killed. They also estimated that such an invasion would kill 5 to 10 million Japanese people. Years later, when historians and scholars analyzed the aftermath of World War II, they learnt the real reason for the Japanese surrender was the Soviet invasion mere hours before the Nagasaki bombing on August 9, 1945. Until this point, the Soviet Union had remained neutral in Japan's war, and many in the Japanese leadership hoped Stalin would intervene and assist them in negotiating better surrender terms with the Americans. The Japanese government was dealt a major setback when Stalin betrayed them by joining the Allies. In the book Racing the Enemy, Stalin, Truman, and the Surrender of Japan, author Tsuyoshi Hasegawa said Japan pinned its last hope on Moscow's mediation for the termination of the war, and that Stalin's abrupt invasion of Japan pulled the rug right out from underneath the Japanese military, puncturing a gaping hole in their strategic plan. Their insistence on the continuation of the war lost its rationale. Furthermore, Terry Sharman, a noted war historian, stated, the leadership in Tokyo realized they had no hope now, and in that sense, Operation August Storm, the Soviet invasion of Japanese-controlled land, did have a greater effect on the Japanese decision to surrender than the dropping of the A-bombs. So, what if both the bombings and the entry of the Soviet Union were the deciding factors of the Japanese surrender? After all, many Japanese people still felt obligated to fight to the death, regardless of the odds. To continue fighting will mean death, but to make peace with the enemy will entail ruin, wrote high-ranking military officer Torashia Kawabe in his journal on August the 9th, the day of both Nagasaki and the Soviet invasion. We have no alternative but to seek life in death, determined to see the entire Japanese people expire with the motherland as their final resting place by continuing to fight, he wrote further. Now that we are talking about a timeline where the bombings never happened, the Americans would have been compelled to launch Operation Downfall, their all-out land invasion of Japan. This would have been the equivalent of D-Day in the Pacific. The invasion's first 24 hours would have been called the X-Day, with troops landing on the shores of Kyushu, Japan's southernmost major island. The US military gave Japanese beaches automobile-inspired code names like Austin, Buick, and Cadillac. As a result, in this version of history, Omaha and Utah Beach would be as well known as Cadillac and Buick Beach. Some historians argue that the massive destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have established a permanent nuclear taboo on the use of such weapons in the future. This taboo may have discouraged the US from firing nuclear weapons in Vietnam and similar wars. Political scholar Nina Tannenwald states that one of the primary factors restraining US leaders' turn to nuclear weapons after 1945 was their often voiced fear about the horrible repercussions that might emerge. If we hadn't seen the horrific outcome of nukes in Japan, this type of restraint probably wouldn't exist. That being said, hundreds of thousands of innocent people lost their lives, so you can't exactly call this revelation a win. A 1966 CIA study on the risk of firing nuclear bombs in Vietnam warned that America's allies would experience fundamental revulsion if the US violated a 20-year ban on nuclear weapon use. As a result, the deepest irony is that a world without Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings could have been more vulnerable to full-scale nuclear war. The history of human invention is both fascinating and terrifying. While we've created some truly amazing things that have advanced our species, we've also built things that can lead to humanity's destruction. Let's keep the conversation going with a couple more related videos, shall we? Check out what it feels like to be shot. Or how about things you never knew about the International Space Station? Go ahead, click one, or better yet, watch both, and learn more about the complexity of the world. What period of World War II do you find fascinating? Is there a specific historical event you'd like us to dive into next? Let us know in the comments below.